My brother chose a cafe for the conversation. Neutral territory. Public enough to discourage scenes, private enough to feel deliberate. He had always preferred environments where his version of events sounded reasonable. When I arrived, he was already seated, fingers drumming lightly against the table. That restless energy he carried when preparing to correct someone's life. "You look tired," he said, not unkindly, not kindly either. I smiled, the automatic social reflex that had survived years of these meetings. My business had been failing for nearly 18 months according to family consensus, though the description depended largely on selective observation. Revenue fluctuations became decline. Strategic downsizing became instability. Silence became incompetence. "I've been worried," he continued, leaning back with practiced concern. "We all have." There it was, the collective authority of we. Family as tribunal. I stirred my coffee without drinking it. "You can't keep going like this," he said. "It's painful to watch." Painful for whom remained unspecified. My business wasn't thriving. That much was true. The past 2 years had forced adjustments I hadn't anticipated, contracts lost, markets shifting, decisions made under pressure. None of it catastrophic, all of it visible enough to invite commentary. Especially from my brother. He had built a career on financial certainty, the kind of success that hardens into identity. Stability wasn't just his condition, it was his moral framework, which made my ambiguity intolerable. "I've spoken to someone," he said carefully. "A lawyer." I finally looked up. "I think it's time we formalize things." The phrasing landed softly, almost elegant. Formalize. As if my autonomy were an administrative inconvenience awaiting correction. "You need protection," he added. "From myself. I'm talking about power of attorney." The cafe noise continued undisturbed, cups clinking, quiet conversations folding into one another. Around us, life maintained its indifferent rhythm. "You're not thinking clearly," he said. "You're exhausted, overwhelmed. This isn't judgment. It's responsibility. Responsibility. Another word that rarely arrives alone. Something tightened briefly inside me, not outrage, but the old, familiar pressure to justify. To explain nuances he had already decided were irrelevant. Then he said it. "You need a guardian." The word sat between us with surprising weight. Not shouted. Not dramatized. Delivered with calm conviction. "You're being pathetic." I nodded slowly, because beneath the insult lay something deeply predictable. My brother did not see me as failing. He saw me as deviating. Struggling, in his framework, was not situational. It was diagnostic. A character assessment. And for a moment, I watched the interaction as if from a slight distance, noticing details usually lost inside emotion, the certainty in his posture, the quiet satisfaction of someone convinced they are intervening heroically. What he didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier I had sold the business. Not under pressure. Not as collapse. But as conclusion. The negotiations had unfolded quietly, months of conversations invisible to family scrutiny. A buyer interested not in my failing operation, but in its assets, its contracts, its long-term potential under different management. The final deposit, $3 million, now rested, quite literally, in my pocket. A small folded document that felt absurdly light for something so structurally heavy. I touched it through the fabric of my coat. A grounding gesture. "I appreciate your concern," I said. He sighed, mistaking composure for resistance. "You always say that." "Actually," I continued, "I just retired." His fingers stopped moving. For a fraction of a second, his expression emptied. Not shock, but cognitive recalculation searching for familiar footing. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." He studied my face with visible irritation. "Retired from what?" "There's nothing left to retire from." The statement carried no malice. Only certainty. I reached into my pocket and placed the folded paper on the table. He didn't touch it. "You're lying," he said flatly, but something in his voice had shifted, confidence thinning into strain. "And," I added gently, "I found your bankruptcy filing." The words landed without force, just information entering the room. His reaction was immediate. Violent not in volume, but in destabilization. That's none of your business. The irony hung there, almost visible. I didn't go looking, I said. It surfaced during the acquisition process. Due diligence. Another institutional phrase with inconvenient consequences. You don't understand, he snapped. That's strategic restructuring. Of course it was. Failure reframed, struggle renamed. I nodded again. Not agreement, recognition, because for the first time, the symmetry of the situation revealed itself with unsettling clarity. The same narrative lens he had applied to my life now turned inward, suddenly intolerable. You liar, he said, though the accusation lacked its earlier stability. Not dominance now, defensiveness. I hope it works out. I replied quietly, and I meant it. There was no satisfaction in his discomfort, only the strange, disorienting sensation of watching a lifelong imbalance correct itself through nothing more dramatic than reality. We sat there in silence. No triumph, no apology. Just two adults separated by a stack of documents neither of us fully wished existed. When I stood to leave, he didn't look up. Outside, the air felt unexpectedly calm. Not victory. Just the unfamiliar steadiness of no longer needing to argue with someone else's version of my competence.